Welcome to this explainer. When we talk about Leigh Bardugo's Shadow and Bone, it's super easy to get completely lost in the politics, the magic, and those terrifying monsters in the fold. But today, we're taking a step back. We're going to reframe the whole narrative and dive into the actual beating heart of the text, the romantic journey of our heroine, Alina Starkov. Because sure, it's a story about world-shifting power, but at its core, it's really just about a young woman trying to figure out exactly where she belongs and, more importantly, who she belongs with.
Okay, let's just jump right into it with this quote. It's chilling, right? But also incredibly seductive. The Darkling actually whispers this to Alina right before a major, pivotal kiss. The problem with wanting is that it makes us weak. Man, that line just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly sets up the emotional stakes for Alina. Her whole journey is literally defined by wanting a real home, wanting to be seen, wanting to be loved. And ironically, it's this massive, unfulfilled yearning that leaves her so vulnerable to the romantic tug-of-war she's about to face.
Section 1. 2 orphans at Karam's Inn.
So, to really wrap our heads around Alina's journey and all those messy romantic entanglements that come later, we have to start at the foundation. Her emotional baseline is tied completely to her childhood in a pretty bleak orphanage, alongside a boy named Mal. They arrived at the Duke's estate as refugees from the border wars. The servants actually called them the Melenshki, the little ghosts, and they were totally inseparable. The text describes them hiding out in cupboards just to eavesdrop, putting on little plays for the mice, and literally holding hands in the dark. I mean, when the powerful Grisha examiners showed up to test them for magic, they just clung to each other. They had absolutely nothing. No parents, zero money, no status. So they found their entire sense of belonging entirely in each other.
But here's the thing. Right from the get-go, there's a huge contrast between them. Even though they were glued at the hip, what was going on inside their heads was totally different. Alina once overheard the housekeeper calling her an ugly little thing, pale and sour. Ouch, right? She felt so isolated she'd actually skip meals. But Mal was shy, sure, but he was always smiling. He was the kind of kid who just easily adapted. He found his footing in the world without much trouble. While Alina, she stayed almost entirely dependent on Mal just to feel anchored. He was, without a doubt, her true north.
Section 2. Separation and Unspoken Love.
Naturally, as they grow up and leave the orphanage to join the military, that cozy childhood dynamic starts to shift. And this pulls us right into a seriously painful chapter for Alina, the sheer agony of unspoken yearning. Out of nowhere, Alina's dormant sun summoner powers are revealed out on the Shadowfold, and bam, she's immediately swept away by the Darkling to the capital, Osalta. Just look at that vast physical distance separating the capital from Mao's military regiment. It's huge. But honestly, the emotional distance is even bigger. Alina is suddenly thrust into this glittering world of elite magic users, totally cut off from the one person who ever made her feel safe.
So, left all alone in the capital, Alina is just drowning in isolation. She's writing these agonizing, heartbreaking letters to Mal and getting absolutely nothing back. Nada. And the kicker is, even before she left, Mal had sprouted into this popular, handsome guy who seemed totally oblivious to her feelings, out there chasing other girls. So Alina basically buries her unrequited love deep down. It's captured so perfectly in this incredibly sarcastic, unspoken thought of hers. Oh, and sorry I fell in love with you for a while there. Make sure to write. You can feel the sting there, right? She's trying so hard to convince herself she's over it, but really, her heart is just in pieces.
Section 3. Seduction of the Darkling.
But as they say, nature abhors a vacuum. And into this massive void of loneliness and heartbreak steps literally the most powerful, mysterious, and let's face it, captivating man in all of Ravka. Talk about a pivot. Alina goes from being this dirty, overlooked orphan to being surrounded by the absolute elite, the glamorous fabricators, etherealki and corporalki, and right at the top of the food chain, the Darkling. For the very first time in her entire life, Alina is truly seen. And I don't mean just noticed. The Darkling actually desires her. He looks at her and says they are going to change the world together. Imagine that. For a girl who has spent her whole life feeling ugly and totally invisible, that kind of validation is just incredibly intoxicating.
So let's break down the core of this romantic conflict, because she's being pulled in two wildly different directions. On one side, we've got Mal. He offers the comfort of a shared history and a deep, profound sense of home. But it comes with the sharp pain of unrequited love and feeling kind of ordinary. Then, on the flip side, you have the Darkling. He offers this dangerously intoxicating seduction, sudden, overwhelming validation, and the promise of literally world-altering power. The Darkling makes her feel like an absolute queen. He fills every single insecurity that Mal's absence created. And it's fascinating to watch how this seduction escalates step by step. It starts with this breathless, totally surprising first kiss in the snow by the lakeshore that just leaves Alina completely dazed. Then, it ramps up to this intense, heavy romantic tension at the winter fete. He corners her, whispering against her neck, totally disarming her. She is swept completely up in the fantasy. But this rapid, dizzying escalation, it spirals right into a very dark, frankly horrifying realization about a certain mythical stag.
Section 4. Betrayal and Dark Realizations. Yeah, the whole romantic fantasy shatters. Just abruptly shatters. When Alina realizes the Darkling's seduction wasn't real love at all. It was a completely calculated, ruthless manipulation. Talk about a reality check dropping like a hammer. The Darkling weaponized her desperate, lifelong need for belonging just to blind her. He didn't want a romantic partner, he wanted a weapon. His master plan was to hunt down this ancient magical stag, kill it, and force its antlers onto Alina as a literal collar to enslave her power. As the trap closes in on her, she thinks, wait to be made into a murderer and a slave. The whole romance? Just a very pretty snare. So Alina makes a run for it, but Mal, who is of course an incredible tracker, finds her out in the wilderness. Unfortunately, they eventually get ambushed and captured by the Darkling's forces. And this forces our whole narrative to pivot into a massive climax of romantic sacrifice. The Darkling is literally holding Mal's life in his hands, demanding Alina's compliance. Which brings us to the ultimate, terrifying question. Will Alina trade her own freedom to save the boy she loves, or will she give in and surrender entirely to the dark, seductive power the collar gives her?
Section 5. Choosing true love. Faced with this impossible dilemma, Alina makes her choice. She chooses to fight. She risks absolutely everything for the boy who, despite all the heartache, was always her true north. And here is the absolute crucial turning point in this whole romantic arc, Mal's realization. While they're locked in a cell, basically waiting to die, Mal finally drops all the walls he built up. He admits that seeing her up there on stage with the Darkling made him suddenly realize exactly what he'd lost. He looks at her and says, "I'm sorry it took me so long to see you, Alina, but I see you now." He finally recognizes her, not just as his plucky childhood friend, but as the powerful, beautiful woman he has actually been in love with this whole time. The text brings Alina's sheer devotion to life through this amazingly poignant memory. She thinks back to a time she was trying to fix a broken blue cup right when Mal got back from a long trip. He scooped her up and spun her around, and she clung to him so tightly that the jagged shards of that broken cup dug right into her palm, actually making her bleed. But she refused to let go. No matter how much it hurt, she held on. And honestly, it is the perfect metaphor for her love for Mal, right? It's enduring. It's occasionally super painful, but it is completely unbreakable.
So totally empowered by this mutual realization of love, Alina actually manages to seize control of the stag's magic. In this desperate, incredibly terrifying maneuver, they manage to escape the Darkling, blasting their way across the monstrous, shadow-filled unsea. Leaving the Darkling absolutely raging in their dust, they managed to book passage on a ship heading out onto the open waters of the true sea, fleeing the country of Ravka entirely.
And that brings us to the emotional wrap-up of this first big chapter in their story. The text leaves us with this beautiful, kind of haunting image. Picture this. At night, Alina and Mal lie curled around each other in the pitch-dark wooden belly of the ship. They're just holding on tight, getting each other through the nightmares and the intense trauma of what they just barely survived. Think about it. They have no country anymore, no army, zero money. But they have each other. They are anchoring each other in the dark, exactly like they did as little kids hiding in those orphanage cupboards. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to chew on. Alina and Mal chose true love over ultimate world-shaping power. They chose each other over the Darkling's incredibly seductive promises. But out there somewhere, the Darkling is still alive, and his ambition knows literally no bounds. So is their love, born in a dusty orphanage and forged in the fires of betrayal, actually strong enough to survive the encroaching darkness that is definitely still ahead? Well, that's exactly the question that makes diving into the rest of this story an absolute must. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep learning.